This is the Marketing Umbrella Podcast, where it's all about getting the information you need from successful leading marketers to build and grow your digital marketing agency. Brought to you by Itamar Shafir, founder and CEO of Umbrella, the technology platform and brand that is powering thousands of marketing agencies around the country. Find him at umbrellaus.com. Now, here's your host, Kevin Pruitt.
This is the Marketing Umbrella Podcast, and my name is Kevin Pruitt. It is my honor to have another special guest with us today. She's an AI marketing strategist and thought leader, empowering businesses to innovate through AI-driven strategies. As the founder of an AI education company and generative AI strategist for the Retail AI Council, she leads industry transformation with actionable insights and a passion for making AI accessible. With a rich background of 10 years in marketing and a deep dive into artificial intelligence over the last 5 years, she stands out as a distinguished entrepreneur, speaker, and community builder. Adding to her accolades, she's been named as a LinkedIn top voice in AI, a testament to her impactful contributions through thought leadership in the overall AI community. Join me in welcoming the real, not the AI version of Ashley Gross to the Marketing Umbrella Podcast. Ashley, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Yes, it is really me.
It is really her. Yeah, we checked it out. We had somebody come and poke her so we could make sure that it was her. But man, bios are so kind of short and sometimes they sound a little sterile. So round it out a little bit. Give our audience a little bit of a foundation who Ashley is.
Sure. Who I am. I'm many things. I wear many hats, and depending on who you ask, I am different things at different times. But I would say at my core, I am a marketer. I'm a tenured marketer. I'm a wife. I'm a mom. And prior to 2020, I had no STEM experience. I thought that I was not cut out for STEM due to my horrible lack of statistics and the ability to really just hone in on math in general, I would say. So prior to 2020, again, no STEM experience, not really dabbling in generative AI tools, but in 2020, many things happened, as you'll recall,
yeah.
right? Kind of a memorable year for everyone. But for me, that's when I found out I was going to be a mom. And so I wanted to condense my 40-hour work week into a 15-hour work week and create the exact same impact and value. And so fast forward from 2020 to 2022, I was working for an enterprise company, and the CMO said, listen, you have been talking so much about all the AI use cases you're doing, how you've condensed your work week, all these great things that you've been able to do, and you seem like you're enjoying it. Would you like to roll out AI to our marketing org of over 100 marketers? And this was pre-ChatGPT. So I was really excited to do this because I was primarily just using Jasper AI.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 months after implementing 25 AI use cases, not only was the marketing org happier because I automated the tasks that they didn't enjoy doing so that they could continue to do only the things that they liked, but also we overachieved our pipeline. We were given a target of 90 million and we hit 115 million.
Wow.
3 months after AI. So I was able to tie the outcome of using generative AI to revenue, which is a language that everyone speaks. And so from there, I was really like, I don't want to do anything else except for this for a very long time, because there's, in my eyes at least, 3 main business problems that every organization at some point in time comes across. And since I was able to use AI to solve for those 3 business problems, that was really what I wanted to focus on. I wanted to align the workforce in general. And that's what I've been doing. I have a team of chief AI officers. We implement my exact formula and my exact strategy into mid-market enterprise companies. This has worked 11 times and counting. And yeah, I'm really excited to actually just be moving the needle as far as AI goes.
So you kind of brushed over that. Here's the 3 problems that every business has. So we need to outline that, and then we can kind of walk through this how we solve these.
Yes. So the 3 main business problems are lack of clean and enriched data without relying on third-party tools, the lack of insight into the customer journey, and then the slow sales cycles.
So I was watching another episode that you had done, another previous podcast, and it was really funny because you had this expression on your face. My British friends would call it cheeky, where you were like sitting there. I was afraid they were going to find out I was using AI and I was going to get fired or something like that. So walk us through that time where you're like, I'm in stealth mode using AI over here because I have a personal problem I'm trying to solve. And then it kind of grew its corporate legs.
Yes. So in 2020, the climate was very different. You know, if you were using AI, there was really no AI education. So nobody really knew about prompting. They didn't know it was a skill that you had to master. They didn't know that you were still working. I think in everyone's mind in 2020, it was like, well, if you're using AI, there's a robot out there that's like doing things for you and you're just sitting at home relaxing. And so I didn't talk about using AI because there was this lack of education with it.
Hmm.
And that was really frustrating for me because what I was seeing online, as far as, AI is going to replace people and jobs and all these things, was not my experience. My
Hmm.
experience was I was still doing the same amount of work, arguably, but instead of doing busy work, it was like, well, I condensed the busy work from 40 hours to 15 hours. And now with all that extra time, I'm conceptualizing building a business. I'm
Mm.
conceptualizing what roles I want for myself. I'm taking on more opportunities, more external mentorships. And for me, just, from that perspective, and there's nothing wrong with this, but I probably would have been on the career path of, I want to be a CMO because when you're a
Hmm.
marketer, I think that's just kind of the default
It's
of
the end
like what,
result. Yeah.
right, that's the end result. And
Hmm.
so when I started using AI, it wasn't really just about the tasks. It was more so I created more paths for myself and I have more options. And so
Hmm.
that felt good because it was like, well, I'm recession proofing myself because I
Yeah.
have all these different skills that I can speak to now. So it wasn't doing less, it was doing more. And so then fast forward to 2022, that whole entire time, I was very intentional with how I was talking about AI. So I very much used it to be that AI champion in my organization that rose to the top. That
Hmm.
probably would have taken me, 5 to 7 years to do if I would have just kept my head down and kept doing the same things I was doing. And I did that by only talking about AI in terms of, hey, here's a process that's wonky. Here's how I use AI to either automate it or speed this part of it up, or better the process in general. Here's how you can benefit from this too. And so I was internally getting my stakeholders from different departments and having
Right.
conversations with directors where I solved their problems for them using generative AI. And then they weren't like, well, why is Ashley teaching us how to do this? They were saying, well, whoa, Ashley just did all of this
Hmm.
and it would have taken us this long. She knows things. Maybe we don't know what those things are, but she knows things that can
Exactly.
help us, which is valuable. And so I was able to create the AI task force and roll out AI, which has led to all these other opportunities that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Technology is always changing. So, I mean, it's a constant battle of, if you know about it today, you're going to be obsolete tomorrow type thing. So, and AI is like at quantum speed compared to just the average, hey, RAM storage doubles every 6 years or doubles every 6 months or something like that. So the idea of keeping up with AI, keeping up with the advances and the changes and the technological improvements. It just seems almost like an impossible task. Do
It
you have
is.
to kind of decide, here's my niche, here's where I'm going to focus, because it's such an enormous elephant anyway to be trying to eat one bite at a time. So how do you kind of manage that? I would say if you're a driven person, it would drive you crazy if you're not able to like stay on top of that mountain, so to speak. So how do you personally manage that?
So yes and no. It definitely drives me crazy because there's always, I mean, this is a fascinating field. So there's
Hmm.
always that part of me that, I'm scaling, we're hiring, we're doing all these things, and that requires me to take a little bit less time for myself to go
Hmm.
research all these new tools. So I would be lying if I didn't say like, it's okay, I'm fine, because I definitely have that fear of missing out. But I also
Hmm.
recognize that that's a healthy fear to have, right?
Hmm.
And just identifying that as I have this fear of missing out. I'm probably not actually missing out, and there's time to go learn about all these new tools. Because here's the thing, I only pay attention to what is going on in the media and all these new updates if it is interrupting my workflow. So if I use these tools and I have a
Hmm.
workflow that I'm using them with, I need to know what is going to be impacted by that, right? And then data security. So if they're
Hmm.
going to change a law with how they collect data and it's going to interfere with CCPA or GDPR, then I need to know because it's
Yeah.
going to affect me and my clients. Other than that, I really have this wish list, honestly, of like, okay, when I have a minute, here's some tools that I want to look
Hmm.
into. But I would also say there's a time and place to do research. And I see a lot of people get caught up on this phase because they do so much research that they don't
Yeah.
actually provide value with these
Right.
tools. So I spent a lot of my time actually after I proved the AI ROI in that enterprise company, when I still had my learning and development budget. After I proved the ROI, I was like, okay, now I see the value. I see
Hmm.
the outcome. I'm tying it to revenue. People are happy about this, so I can take my foot off the gas pedal for 2 weeks.
Right.
And it took me a couple more than 2 weeks. I would say it probably took me 4 to 6, but I ended up vetting 167 AI tools. But there was a
Wow.
time and a place for that, right?
Hmm.
So I did the work that needed to be done. I proved the value on it. And then when I had buy-in and everybody else was a little bit more trained up on those specific use cases in that tool, that's when I went back to the drawing board and said, okay, here's some more tools that I'm
Hmm.
going to vet.
When you were vetting those tools, were you vetting them under the, I guess, matrix of are they useful and effective, or are they useful and effective to me? Because those are two vastly different things,
Yes.
and it's, I mean, it's such a broad, range that, if you want to be the SaaS evaluator of everything AI, then you got to, you really have to have a broad net. But when you were looking at these tools, were you looking at it under the lens of the problem you were trying to solve and applying those tools to that, or just in general?
Both, because I kind of have this unified approach. So I knew the three problems I wanted to solve for were, lack of insights into the customer journey, lack of clean and rich data, and slow sales cycles. So if I had my problem, then I started kind of taking inventory of, okay, here are those three main problems. When we're looking at a solution, there's going to be a huge solution, but how do we break those solutions down into use cases? And then I looked for the AI tools that solved those specific use cases
Hmm.
because you can't do all of this at once, right? So, lack of clean and enriched data. You first have to start by taking all the data out of all of your CRMs, cleaning them, actually enriching them, figuring out whether or not those contacts are prioritized to be high intent leads first. Um, so there's steps that you need to take in order to solve that big problem and
Right.
breaking them down into tangible use cases and then applying the tools that were literally created to solve those use cases. In my mind is really the only logical way to do it because it's really hard to keep track of how much time are you spending on this tool or
Hmm.
how much money is it saving you. So I like to see like how fast can this tool solve this specific use case for the business? But then also from an onboarding experience, like, is it user friendly? Is it a good
Hmm.
user experience? Because it's not just about me and my learning experience. I have to be able to teach other officers. So
Yeah.
if it's taking me 20 minutes to onboard myself, that tool is not usable for me, you
Right.
know?
Let's talk about Chief AI Officer a little bit. So, when you're looking at a new a new area that's kind of burgeoning, and growing, and people want to have some credibility in that space. And you're thinking, okay, then how do we certify, people in that space? And you're looking at, there's really kind of two main tracks. I mean, it's like the academic track and the corporate side of things. It says you can be Google certified, or you can get, your Harvard stamp of, data analytics or whatever. And my experience has been on the academic side. Sometimes it's a little more ethereal,
Hmm.
and I don't want to use the word less practical, but kind
Right.
of in that space. And on the Google side, Microsoft, Apple side, whatever you're going, that's much more pragmatic, the
Yes.
certification. So how are you, kind of approaching this, or how is the AI world approaching certification?
That's a
And
great question. I can speak from my experience. So, what made me seek out Chief AI Officer was obviously after I went and proved that ROI, I was like, okay, now it makes sense for me to go back to school and learn how to
hmm
code and get some data science certifications. And, when you see the value and you see the end goal, you're like, okay, yeah, I definitely want to invest more of my time learning. And so for me, I was taking over 30 AI certifications from some of the conglomerates you just
hmm
named.
yeah,
And none of them were preparing people, in my opinion, on how to do what I just did. It's completely, to your
right.
point, it's completely different to read and take a couple courses and quizzes online about data
hmm
security and ethics and governance, and then be the sole responsible person in your organization for purchasing an AI tool and the implications that that comes with, for
hmm
example. Because you have to have the COO and sometimes the CEO sign off on that, and you're going back with IT. And so my point was, none of those certifications I was taking were actually setting people up for those conversations because 90% of AI implementation is communication. And
hmm
so when I met Chris Daigle, the founder of Chief AI Officer, we were both speaking at a conference and was familiar with what I was doing already. And he said, we have this program, we've been building it, since X, and here's the end goal. Um, do you want to take this program and basically like grill us and tell us like what's good, what's bad, what's missing? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I would love to do that. Um, and so I went through the program and I didn't have expectations for it, but I didn't have good or bad expectations. I just kind of went through it not knowing what to expect. And the thing that stood out with me about their program and their curriculum was they have an MBA portion.
Hmm.
So they have the learning labs, right? They have the practitioner hours, they have the video modules and the reading material. But then they have the MBA portion at the end before you get certified, where you stand in front of the board of directors and they ask you questions like, how
Wow.
are you going to approach this?
Get your
What are the
PhD in AI here.
right? And so for me, I was like that is what everybody else is missing, in my opinion,
Mm,
that they have. And so that's ultimately why I decided to partner up with them, because their approach to certification very much aligned with what would be needed in the field. And so to add on to that, I think the blend of learning about it, having that text in front of you and being able to watch tutorials, but then also having to communicate and be in like a community style office hours type of environment where you're
hmm.
going back and forth. How would you approach this? How would you approach that? And knowing the fears that exist and the conversations you're going to
Hmm.
have to shut down in a very nurturing, caring way, that is what is going to set people apart for these roles. And that's why it's incorporated into who we hire, is that they have to go through that program. Anybody can learn about AI, but communicating AI and safeguarding it for other people and clients is crucial.
So is that becoming kind of an industry standard, as far as the broader marketing community out there? Are they looking to, places like this that says, hey, we need to have some kind of consistency, some kind of, understand like agreed, level of competence or something like that? I mean, what do you see that growing into?
So I definitely see that being the direction that it will grow into. Right now, I'm seeing this split where the folks that are becoming chief AI officers, it's not because their company wanted them to be,
Hmm.
it's because they know either by doing their own research, paying attention to the news, that chief AI officers are not going anywhere. There's a huge market cap for generative AI, um, relatively in general, but they understand that they need to be proactive and educate themselves before the market dictates
Hmm.
what these positions
Yeah.
look like and how much to
Yeah.
charge for. What I'm seeing from an employer standpoint is that they're not understanding AI enough as far as what's possible and not possible. So they're kind of having this like fear paralysis where they're either going all in on AI and
Hmm.
not necessarily having enough conversations and alignment, or they're not doing anything. They don't have an IT policy, no AI usage policy. They know their employees are using it because everybody is using AI, right? Like they're tapping into it, they're playing around with it, but they don't have the luxury of knowing what LLMs and what data is being put in. So they're not keeping track of it because they're so afraid of it. So then they would rather bring our team in to kind of help them navigate those situations and enable them a little bit. So it's a very disruptive industry. There's not a lot
Hmm.
of standards in general, and I think that that's why this is really helping, because we're kind of creating the standards where there aren't any. And
Right.
most of the time, with the emergence of social media, we didn't really see that happening. We just kind of
Hmm.
saw everyone go wild. And so
Yeah.
now kind of pausing and saying, well, here's our standard. Here's what makes our certification what it is.
Hmm.
Here's who our team is and the clients they've worked for. Without having anybody expect us to do that, that I think is what's leveling the playing field up a little bit more as far as professionalism goes and expectations.
Well, I think that's one of your personal pillars, one of your personal drivers too, is
Yes.
integrity, in communication, integrity in this whole AI space, and transparency, and making sure that there's a moral fiber, that's kind of overlaid to this crazy, Wild West chaos that AI is
Yes.
kind of generating. But was there a point that when I mean, obviously you were early self-taught, so you kind of dove into this and it just kind of grew. Was there a point that there was some comfort level or credibility that you gained when you thought, I stepped out and I started talking to other people like me? I ran into
Yeah.
other people that knew things, as they
Yes.
described you, that says, hey, I'm not weird, I'm not,
Yes.
I do know things.
That's such a great question. I think the point for me really was when I stopped talking to technical people and I started talking to everyday people that didn't have the background. They didn't know the history of machine learning and
Hmm.
natural language processing. They just wanted to use AI to solve problems, either
Hmm.
for the sake of enjoying their jobs more and not getting burnt out, or just being able to create more revenue because marketers get held to really high standards and they
Hmm.
get dealt hands that aren't necessarily fair and equal to the rest of the C-suite staff. And so I think for marketers specifically, we are usually the first to try to use technology for the
Hmm.
sake of using it to solve problems because we don't need another tool to be onboarded to. Like
Right.
we are good with our tech
Right.
stacks. They are
Exactly.
already really big. So I think we have this kind of like internal emotional awareness of like, okay, it's 10 minutes. Did this tool work? Yes or no? Move on if it's no. If it's yes,
Hmm.
let's keep going
Hmm.
because we don't have time already and we have to pivot and we
Yep.
have to be trained to see like how this affects this and how this goes
Hmm.
into and translates into the product and the sales. So just having that keen emotional awareness, I think, is what made me go like, oh, okay, now I get like why the marketers are picking up to this as fast as they are.
I think one huge problem that marketers have is the fact, and you mentioned, is that they're held to a higher standard maybe than other areas. But one of them is the fact that, I want you to show me tangible ROI, immediate. I want microwave ROI. I don't want,
Yes.
I'm not talking 6 month lag here, that this is a lagging indicator that I can show you, in 2025, what we did in
Yes.
2024 mattered. But is AI changing that equation? Is it
Yes.
helping you to say I can show you ROI much sooner?
100%. I think also too where there's a bit of a opportunity for up leveling and education in general, I would say is the CMOs should be your biggest internal buy-in because you're
Hmm.
alleviating their pain point,
Yep.
marketing and sales, but you should really have a good rapport with your CMO because everything, if you're doing this right, kind of bubbles up to making their lives easier as far as like creating the strategy, understanding the metrics that are needed.
Hmm.
Um, but to your point, a lot of the times when I'm talking to organizations, it's the CMO who's seeking people out. They're seeking these, AI specialists out in this
Hmm.
ongoing training because they're dealt, a hand of, well, why don't you do AI under the realm of digital transformation with
Yeah.
like no resources, no
Right.
safeguarding in place,
Hmm.
just kind of this thought of like, please go do something with this, right?
Here's some magic fairy
Here's
dust.
something.
That's right.
But but when you're using AI just for the sake of lack of insight into the customer journey, for example, there's so many times where that is the core root issue.
Hmm.
But depending on where you sit in the organization, you don't see that. And so if you're
Right.
using generative AI to solve for that, then the issue that you're alleviating at the very top is that marketing and sales friction between C-suite, where marketing is saying, well, we brought in this many leads, but sales only closed this many. And in reality, sales is like, well, those weren't high intent leads anyways. And
Hmm.
also, we have no idea how you got those leads. So we didn't know how to nurture them and convert them.
Yeah.
And so if you're going into using generative AI to solve real business problems and make meaningful AI implementation use cases, you are going to alleviate the pressure from the C-suite staff, specifically CMOs, CROs, and CFOs, because let's not forget, they get pulled into those weekly
Hmm.
calls. And if you're over measuring every single marketing activity, then those CFOs, CROs, and CMOs are in weekly top of funnel calls
Yeah.
and middle of funnel calls and then
Hmm.
bottom of funnel calls. And it's usually the CFO that's like, why do we care about this? Like, are we converting high intent
Exactly.
traffic, right? Like,
Yeah.
what's our churn level? What's our upsell level? Like, those are the numbers that I need because
Hmm.
they want things that are tangible. So when you
Yeah.
start getting into like MQL, SQL, and dividing these terms and over measuring these activities, you're hurting everybody at the top because you're making it more difficult and unnecessary for everyone.
I love that description. I can just, you painted a word picture of these three people sitting in a room every week, nervous, sweating, drinking,
Yes.
inordinate amounts of coffee, trying
Yes.
to stay, on the cutting edge. But our primary audience is in the kind of the marketing agency space for our
Mhm.
podcast here, and it is such a hot button issue, in that space. So if you were leading a marketing agency today, what would be, one of your first steps in saying, is my primary role to do this for my client or my primary role to educate my client? Is there a combination of these two things? Where would they step into this fast moving stream?
Okay. So if I was running an agency, I would first take an inventory of what are the tech stacks that I like to work with? Like which ones already are my core tech stacks that I already know really, really well, every single feature. For me, that looks like HubSpot, Tableau, Salesforce. I know
Hmm.
them all. So it makes sense that I have a core foundation and I'm not just using every CRM under the umbrella because it's going to make the onboarding and the education piece that much more longer. So let's just say they pick their CRMs, right? Like I just did. Then from there, it's really okay, out of the clients that we have, what are the main issues that I'm hearing? Maybe it's lack of clean and enriched data. Maybe it's lack of insight into the customer journey. If you can guarantee that the data that you are dealing with is clean and enriched, then I would say focus on taking inventory of in the customer journey for your prospects. Where are you often seeing the biggest opportunity for education being?
Hmm.
And then plug in an AI tool that makes your job a little bit easier so that you're actually, to your point, doing a little bit of both. You can educate the client on what the AI tool is doing for them for that specific problem, but you also have the AI tool and you're doing that work for them
Yeah.
because you can't teach them if they're worried about the house burning down, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
so
They're
you
not
kind of
listening
have to.
anyway. That's right.
Right, they're not listening anyway. So you kind of have to fix their problems and maybe even record how you fix them so that
Hmm.
that's the portion of enablement so that when they are in a better frame of mind, maybe past fourth quarter, right?
Right.
Then they can learn. But you don't want to like leave with all that information because then they're going to be back to square zero
Hmm.
and they're losing trust with you because it's not like you actually taught them anything. You just solved their problems and left and they're like, "But I want to know what you
Yeah.
did."
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I would do.
Oh, I love that the idea that there is obviously a combination of those two things, but I mean one of them is know your audience. Know, I mean that's communication 101. Know when they're able to receive the message. I can scream it at them, but if they're not
Yes.
in a listening stance, that's not going to make any difference. So Ashley, we covered a lot of things today. Is there anything that we have not touched on that you kind of like just a nugget that's kind of been bouncing around in that ever active brain of yours that you'd like to share right before we hop into our lightning round?
I would say my favorite nugget currently kind of has been, to your point, you said a lot of your audience is marketing agencies. Start charging based on the outcome you're providing and not the hourly rate. Like you're not a busy bee.
Mm,
You're not a busy, you don't need to do busy work for the sake of doing busy work. And especially when we have generative AI tools that can do a lot of that busy work, agents, right? There's so many great products that are AI agents that do the work. And I'm not saying like you're not working when I say that. I just mean this is a great time for you to really figure out what is the outcome that you can provide to people. Like, what is the pain that you alleviate? And then tie that to a price, and that is your worth. You shouldn't
mm,
be charging an hourly rate though, because there's so many tools that can do the busy work and take up the monotony and put you back in that strategist role so that you can look at your pipeline and you can look at your roadmap and continue to evolve and adapt to meet your needs of the
hmm.
customers that you're servicing without having to get caught up in the mundane busy work. That would be my best piece of
That
advice.
I love that. I mean, otherwise you just create another job.
Right.
You've gone from one job to another one. So
Exactly.
with more bosses probably than you had before. But this is one of my favorite parts of the podcast is just jumping into the rapid fire.
Okay.
And they're going to sound very disparate questions, and you're going to think, what is this crazy man asking me about these things? But there's a method to our madness behind this,
Okay.
but I'm going to ask you a question, just rapid fire, first thing that comes to mind, just quick, short answers. Did you get along with your parents growing up?
No.
Do you have siblings?
Yes.
Do you have a pet or pets?
Yes. Three.
Children. I think you already answered that one.
One.
One child. What time on a work day do you wake up in the morning?
4 a.m.
What time do you go to bed on a work day?
8 p.m.
Are you sure you're in the Eastern time zone? That's right. Your clock is wrong. That's right. Um, Ideal vacation spot. Money, not an object.
An island, a remote island,
Any
any
island.
remote
It doesn't matter
island.
where it is.
Just
Got
less
sand.
people. Yes.
Sand, less people, and no tech stack.
Exactly. No tech.
How does faith affect the way you do business?
It, it is the reason I do business. It's how I do business. It's very tied to my integrity. If it doesn't feel right, it doesn't matter what the price is, I walk. I'm very intentional just because I think once you quiet the noise, it becomes a lot easier when you're doing business to kind of
Mm-hmm.
weed red flags out a lot
Mm-hmm.
faster. And so for me, that's very much tied to faith and having um, intentional and constructive sessions daily.
On a moral compass.
Yeah.
If you were king or queen for the day in the marketing climate, what was one change you would make?
That's such a loaded
You got a
question. I
list.
would
That's right. I
change
got a
so
whole list of
many.
things. That's right. Narrow it down to the
I
top one.
would make it illegal for everyone to track every single marketing activity, and I would make them have to focus on only the metrics that drive the biggest impacts in their organization tied to revenue.
Well, I think I heard you talking about that, about the tracking mechanisms that are being kind of legislated out of the
Yes.
process, now. So I think that's an issue that's kind of front of mind for you anyway.
Yes.
So I love that. I love it. Ashley, thank you so much for just taking time to share with us today. It's been a delightful conversation and an honor to have you on. And just
Thank
thanks for
you.
sharing your expertise and your insights. And I want to encourage our listeners. I mean, she is one of the most active people on LinkedIn in this entire space. I mean, literally, it's in my feed on a fairly constant basis in a good way. So I know, and a lot of interaction on the posts as well. So it's not just eye candy. It is absolutely content that is going to help you move the needle in your business. And just thank you for just sharing your expertise with our listeners and just helping marketing agency owners grow and scale their business. Ashley, have a great weekend. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another great episode of the Marketing Umbrella Podcast, where we provide the information you need from successful leading marketers to build and grow your digital marketing agency. To learn more, go to umbrellaus.com.